To understand how LeBron James silenced Skip Bayless forever with just 3 words, we need to go back to the moment when it all began. An invitation that seemed innocent but would transform into the most explosive confrontation in American sports television history. It was a cold November morning in Los Angeles. LeBron's phone rang with a call no one expected. On the other side of the line, a hesitant voice. "LeBron, this is from Undisputed Production. Skip Bayless would like to invite you for an honest conversation on the show." You can perceive how those words echoed strangely in the air. An honest conversation? After 17 years of relentless criticism? Rich Paul, LeBron's agent, was present when the call happened. His reaction was immediate and visceral. 17 years criticizing you, questioning every move, every decision, and now he wants an honest conversation? The incredulity dripped from every word. "LeBron, this is a trap. Skip built an entire career on top of your name." But something in LeBron's voice changed at that moment. Something that Rich Paul recognized. The same silent determination that preceded the big career decisions. "Rich," said LeBron, with a calm that contrasted with the tension in the air, 17 years is too long for any misunderstanding. How many times in life do you need to face someone who spent years questioning who you are? LeBron's answer came without hesitation. It's time to have this conversation face to face. The days that followed, the news leaked through the corridors of Fox Sports like a whisper that gradually transformed into a roar. LeBron James, the king, would finally step into Skip Bayless's territory. The Undisputed Production tried to maintain discretion, but the energy in the studio was electrified. Assistants whispered in the hallways. Technicians checked equipment with unusual nervousness. It's impossible not to feel how the atmosphere was charged with expectation. Shannon Sharpe, who, for years had tried to moderate Skip's most acid provocations, knew that something historic was about to happen. In a private conversation backstage, his words to Skip were direct and loaded with concern. "Skip, you have to be careful with what you're going to say. This isn't just any player coming here anymore. It's LeBron." But Skip Bayless, at 71 years old, had built an entire career based on calculated provocations. For him, LeBron James wasn't just an athlete. He was the fuel that fed his most controversial opinions, the name that generated his most viral moments. 17 years of material. 17 years of criticism that ranged from questioning leadership to painful comparisons with Michael Jordan. At that moment, in the cold backstage of Fox Sports, 2 titanic forces were about to collide. LeBron arrived at the studio on an afternoon that seemed ordinary, but carried the weight of almost 2 decades of accumulated tension. Assistants avoided unnecessary conversations. The air conditioning seemed colder than normal. Even the security guards showed subtle nervousness, as if they sensed that something different was about to happen. In the minutes that preceded the recording, LeBron found a moment of silence in his improvised dressing room. He closed his eyes and allowed his mind to revisit fragments of the last 20 years. The chosen one failed again. LeBron doesn't have the clutch gene. He needs help to win. How is it possible for someone to build an entire career questioning another person's greatness? But something deeper pulsed in his chest at that moment. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. Clarity about who he was, about what he had conquered, about the legacy he was building not just as an athlete, but as a man, father, and leader. When they finally met in the studio, the greeting between LeBron and Skip was polite, but loaded with a tension that everyone around could feel on their skin. Skip, with his characteristic smile, couldn't resist a subtle provocation. The chosen one honors us with his presence. LeBron smiled back, but his gaze carried something different. Something that Shannon Sharpe immediately recognized. The same expression that preceded decisive moments in the playoffs. The show began with Skip following his usual script. Provocations about super teams, questioning about leadership, insinuations about needing help to win. LeBron responded with patience, but internally was mapping every word, every pattern, every strategy that Skip used to diminish his achievements. Naturally, this leads us to question, how long can a person maintain composure when their most fundamental values are systematically attacked? The answer would come in a matter of minutes, when Skip would cross a line that would transform that conversation from sporting to deeply personal. And it was at that moment that LeBron James decided that 17 years was enough time. What happened in the next 15 minutes would forever change the dynamic between sports critics and athletes in America. But to understand the magnitude of what was about to explode, you need to perceive how Skip Bayless was following a script that had worked for decades. "LeBron," said Skip, leaning slightly forward with that smile that Shannon Sharpe knew very well. "Let's talk about this so-called clutch gene that everyone mentions. Michael Jordan never needed to assemble super teams to win." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop a few degrees with each word. LeBron maintained his relaxed posture, but something subtle changed in his breathing. "Interesting perspective," he responded with a calm that contrasted with the provocation, coming from someone who never stepped on a professional court. You can perceive how this first exchange established the tone of everything that would follow. Skip, fed by what he interpreted as passivity, escalated his provocations. "How many times did you need to change teams to manage to win? Cleveland, Miami, back to Cleveland, now Lakers. Seems more like ring chasing than legacy building." "Skip," LeBron interrupted softly, but with a firmness that made Shannon straighten up in his chair. "You're confusing adaptability with desperation. Great leaders make difficult decisions." But Skip Bayless had built an entire career on not backing down when he encountered resistance. Like a boxer who feels the opponent wobble, he increased the intensity of the blows. "Talking about leadership is interesting, LeBron. True leaders don't abandon their teams when things get difficult. True leaders don't create super teams because they can't win alone." It's impossible not to feel how the atmosphere in the studio was becoming electrified. Each word carried more weight than the previous one. LeBron closed his eyes for a second, just 1 second, but enough for everyone in the room to perceive that something was changing. When he opened them, his voice carried an authority that until then had been contained. "Skip, in 17 years of career, how many games have you played under pressure? How many times have you carried the weight of an entire city on your back?" "I don't need to play to recognize when someone doesn't have what it takes in decisive moments," Skip responded, his voice gaining an aggressiveness that Shannon tried to soften with a subtle gesture. But then Skip made the mistake that would transform that sports discussion into something deeply personal. "And frankly, LeBron, when you teach your children about leadership, I hope you use better examples than your own." The silence that followed was deafening. How many times in life do you witness the exact moment when a person decides that someone has gone too far? In that Fox Sports studio, everyone present, cameras, technicians, producers, felt the weight of that instant. LeBron leaned forward, and his voice, when it finally echoed again, carried an intensity that cut through the air like a blade. Now you're going to listen to me for real, Skip." The change in LeBron's posture was so dramatic that it seemed like another person had taken his place. 17 years of professional criticism was one thing. Mentioning his children? That crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "You built 17 years of career talking about my name," LeBron continued, each word measured and precise, like a surgeon making an incision. 17 years. Your success is directly linked to my success. Every show, every comment, every provocation, you need me more than I need you. Skip tried to interrupt, but LeBron raised his hand with an authority that made the host fall silent instantly. 4 NBA titles, 4 Finals MVPs, 4 regular season MVPs, more than 38,000 points, second highest scorer in history. And you want to talk about leadership? LeBron's voice gained strength with each achievement mentioned. "When I win, you say it was luck or help from teammates. When I lose, you say it's lack of clutch. Convenient, isn't it?" The studio was so silent that it was possible to hear the hum of the air conditioning. Shannon Sharpe stared fixedly at the table, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "Michael Jordan doesn't even know you, Skip, but you talk like you're close friends. You use his name to diminish other people, including mine." Skip, trying to regain control of the situation, made his final move. "LeBron, you're too emotional for someone who considers himself a leader." And it was at that moment that LeBron James delivered the phrase that would become viral, that would be reproduced millions of times, that would define not just that conversation, but an entire new way of dealing with provocations. With a calm that contrasted with the intensity of everything that had happened, LeBron looked directly at Skip and said, "I'm being civilized. I'm just not being small." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but seemed eternal. Shannon Sharpe shook his head slowly, like someone who recognizes they had just witnessed something historic. LeBron didn't get up, didn't shout, didn't lose his composure. Simply established a definitive limit with 3 words that would echo far beyond that studio. Naturally, this leads us to question: when was the last time you saw someone transform a personal attack into a lesson in dignity? The show continued for a few more minutes, but everyone knew the decisive moment had already passed. Skip tried some additional provocations, but his voice had lost conviction. LeBron responded politely, but with an authority that didn't exist at the beginning of the show. When the cameras finally stopped recording, LeBron greeted Shannon with genuine respect, waved politely to Skip, and left the studio with the same dignity with which he had arrived. But outside, on the streets of Los Angeles, something was happening that none of them could predict. 3 minutes. That's all it took for a 15-second clip to transform the American internet into an explosion of reactions. "I'm being civilized. I'm just not being small." Those 9 words traveled faster than any play LeBron had ever made on court. The first post came from an anonymous fan who was watching live. LeBron just taught a masterclass in dignity on national TV. In a matter of minutes, the clip was being shared, cut, remixed, and viralized at a speed that not even social media algorithms could keep up with. You can perceive how the collective energy of millions of people can create an unstoppable force. LeBron vs. Skip became a worldwide trending topic in less than 15 minutes. But it wasn't just about sports. It was about something much deeper and universal. People around the country began sharing their own stories about establishing limits, about maintaining dignity in the face of provocations, about the difference between being firm and being cruel. The first athlete to react was Steph Curry, traditionally discreet on social media. Class and strength can coexist. we just saw that live." Then it was like floodgates opened. Kevin Durant tweeted, "17 years of hate," and the man responded with pure elegance. Serena Williams posted, "Dignity over destruction. Always." It's impossible not to feel how this wave of support created an emotional current that transcended sports. But the most surprising reaction came from someone unexpected. Michael Jordan, who rarely manifests publicly about controversies, authorized his team to release a statement. "I respect how LeBron handled the situation. Maintaining composure in the face of provocation is the mark of a true champion." Sports show newsrooms went into emergency mode. At ESPN, Stephen A. Smith dedicated an entire monologue to the confrontation. "People, we just witnessed Skip Bayless meet someone at his level. And LeBron showed that you can win a debate without destroying a person." Would you tease? Many times, have you seen American sports media stop to discuss ethical limits instead of just generating controversy? Other hosts began moderating their own tones. Colin Cowherd, known for similar provocations, went on air the next day with a reflection. "Maybe it's time we questioned where the line is between entertainment and systematic disrespect." Meanwhile, LeBron maintained a silence that seemed even more powerful than his words in the studio. He refused requests from dozens of interviews. His only public manifestation was a post on Instagram, a photo with his children, and the simple caption, "Family first. Always." Naturally, this leads us to understand that true strength doesn't always need to shout to be heard. The Lakers had a game the next night against the Phoenix Suns. The public expected some kind of statement, but LeBron simply played. 35 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds. After the game, when asked about the confrontation with Skip, his response was direct. "My focus is here, with my team, building something positive." On the other side, Skip Bayless made a decision that would reveal a lot about his character. Instead of backing down or reflecting, he doubled down. On the next Undisputed show, without LeBron present, Skip escalated his criticism. "If LeBron thinks he can intimidate me with his motivational speeches, he's wrong. The truth about his career remains the same." But something fundamental had changed. The comments on the show's social media were massively negative. "You didn't learn anything? Still don't understand that you lost? Dignity versus ego. And you chose wrong." Undisputed's ratings plummeted in the following days. Not drastically, but enough for Fox Sports executives to notice. More importantly, the type of audience was changing. The numbers showed that the public was rejecting the tone of personal provocation. Shannon Sharpe, backstage, began distancing himself from the most acid provocations. In private conversations with producers, he expressed discomfort. Provocation is one thing. Systematic disrespect is another. You can perceive how a single moment of dignity can create waves that reach far beyond where we imagine. 3 weeks after the confrontation, something extraordinary happened. Teachers around the country began using the clip in classes about conflict resolution. The phrase, "I'm just not being small," became a mantra in schools, workplaces, even in family therapies. Letters arrived, by the thousands at LeBron's office. A mother from Detroit wrote, "My 12-year-old son was suffering bullying at school. I showed him your video. Now he understands the difference between fighting back and maintaining dignity." A technology company executive in San Francisco reported, "I used your approach in a difficult meeting with an aggressive client. I maintained firmness without losing class. It worked." How is it possible that a 15-second response on a sports show transforms into life philosophy for millions of people? The answer was in the universality of the experience. Everyone had already faced a Skip Bayless in their lives. That person who provokes you systematically, who crosses boundaries, who confuses aggressiveness with strength. And LeBron had shown a different path. I'm being civilized. I'm just not being small. The phrase evolved with each repetition, gaining layers of meaning that went far beyond the original context. He wasn't being small in his reactions. He wasn't being small in his dignity. He wasn't being small in his example for his children. Naturally, this leads us to question, when was the last time you saw a life lesson emerge from a television confrontation? But the real test of that philosophy was still to come. Because superficial changes are easy to make and easy to undo. Real transformations, those take time to manifest, but when they happen, they permanently alter the cultural landscape. And in the months that followed, it would become clear that that moment in the Fox Sports studio had planted seeds that would grow far beyond what anyone could imagine. 3 months after the confrontation that stopped America, something subtle but powerful had changed in the sports media landscape. The Undisputed show continued on air. Skip Bayless still made his provocations, but an invisible line had been drawn. The provocations now had limits. The tone had moderated. The audience had matured. You can perceive how real. Transformations don't happen overnight, but through gradual changes that accumulate like drops forming an ocean. Skip never publicly admitted that he had crossed a line that November day, but his comments about LeBron began focusing more on statistics and game decisions than on character attacks. The change was subtle, but those who followed the show religiously noticed. The venom had decreased. The substance had increased. Shannon Sharpe, in subsequent interviews, was more direct about the EBV impact of that moment. We all learned something that day. There's a difference between sports debate and personal disrespect. LeBron taught us where that line is. The transformation spread like waves in a lake. Other sports shows began questioning their own limits. Producers received guidance about the difference between constructive controversy and destructive provocation. Younger hosts studied the confrontation in workshops about ethics in sports journalism. It's impossible not to feel how a single demonstration of dignity can redefine standards for an entire industry. But the deepest impact wasn't happening in television studios. It was happening in classrooms, workplaces, family conversations around the country. A high school teacher in Atlanta created an entire class based on the confrontation. How would you react if someone questioned your worth for years and then attacked your family? She used the video to teach about self-control, establishing boundaries, and the difference between strength and aggressiveness. An executive in Chicago reported how he had applied the philosophy in a tense meeting. My boss constantly provoked me in front of the team. After seeing how LeBron dealt with Skip, I learned that I can be firm without being rude. It completely changed the dynamic in the office. How many times does a 15-second phrase transform into a life manual for millions of people? Letters continued arriving at LeBron's office months later. A single mother from Phoenix wrote, "My ex-husband provoked me during our children's custody exchanges. Your approach taught me that I can establish boundaries without creating more conflict. My children now see a strong mother, not an aggressive mother." LeBron, in his first detailed interview about the confrontation, 6 months later, explained his philosophy. It wasn't about winning a debate or humiliating someone. It was about showing that you can be firm without being cruel. That dignity isn't weakness, it's controlled strength. His words echoed beyond sports, being cited in self-help books, corporate seminars, and even in family therapy sessions. Establishing boundaries isn't disrespect, LeBron continued. It's self-love. And when you love yourself enough not to accept systematic disrespect, you teach others, especially children, that they also deserve to be treated with dignity. Naturally, this leads us to understand that great lessons frequently emerge from the most unexpected moments. The IB term LeBron effect began being used in communication schools to describe how dignity and firmness can coexist. Sports media scholars pointed to that confrontation as a watershed moment. Before and after, I'm just not being small. 1 year after the confrontation, research showed that sports programs with a more respectful tone had more engaged and loyal audiences. The public was rejecting the circus in favor of more substantive content. Skip Bayless, in a rare demonstration of introspection, during an interview admitted, "We all evolve. Sports are always changing, and maybe the way we talk about them should change too." It wasn't a direct apology, but for those who had known Skip for decades, that represented significant evolution. You can perceive how even the most change-resistant people can be touched by authentic demonstrations of strength and dignity. 2 years later, during an awards ceremony, LeBron and Skip met again. The greeting was polite, professional, but devoid of the previous tension. Skip even offered a genuine compliment about a recent LeBron playoff performance. The relationship had evolved from personally antagonistic to professionally respectful. They weren't friends, but they had found common ground based on clear boundaries and mutual respect. Young athletes began citing that confrontation as an example of how to deal with criticism. "LeBron showed us that you don't need to shout to be heard," said Ja Morant in an interview. "That dignity isn't weakness, it's controlled strength." The phrase had transcended its original context. "I'm just not being small" became a mantra for anyone facing systematic provocations. At work, at school, in relationships. How is it possible that 9 words spoken in a moment of tension transform into universal philosophy? The answer was in the authenticity of the moment. LeBron hadn't rehearsed that response, hadn't consulted press advisors, had simply responded from his deepest values, and that authenticity resonated with millions of people facing similar situations. In schools around the country, posters with the phrase appeared in hallways. Companies included professional dignity workshops in their training programs. Therapists used the concept to help clients establish healthy boundaries. The true measure of that confrontation's impact wasn't in audience statistics or trending topics. It was in the small, daily changes in how ordinary people dealt with conflict and provocation. You don't need to shout to be heard. Dignity isn't weakness, it's controlled strength. Establish boundaries, but maintain class. Those lessons, born from a television confrontation, had become part of American cultural fabric. And perhaps that's true greatness, not just winning games or breaking records, but inspiring others to be better versions of themselves. Because in the end, 17 years of criticism had produced something that neither LeBron nor Skip could have predicted. A master class in dignity that would echo far beyond sports. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best victories are those that elevate everyone involved. After all, great things happen when someone decides not to be small.